Several Nigerian women pressure groups have since yesterday been making a case at the Constitution Amendment public hearings in respect of greater representation in the governance process. And this is against the backdrop of sustained agitation for affirmative action, improvement of numbers regarding girl-child education, protection from molestation, and recompense for sexual offenders, among other issues germane to the growth and development of Nigeria's womenfolk. We're now going to have a conversation with Mandy Asagba, a lawyer and president, African Women Lawyers Association. Mandy is the immediate past president of the Nigerian chapter of the association and the principal partner of Amanda D. Asagba Chambers, which specializes in corporate practice, family law, real estate, human rights, international law, and immigration. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Well, as president of the African Women Lawyers Association, you were in the forefront of the call for a declaration of a state of emergency, if possible, with regard to the status of women in Nigeria. And now we have this constitution amendment process, open hearings going on in 6 geopolitical zones. What efforts are you and your associates either within the African Women Lawyers Association or outside of it, doing to push the case for women empowerment in line with the SDG goal number 5? And do you have any hope, or are you confident that the National Assembly means well when it puts gender equality as one of the major issues to be considered?
Yeah, well, to a large extent, I would say they mean well. It's good to be optimistic. So I'll start on that basis. Now, gender parity, it's one aspect of this constitutional amendment that we're actually seeking for. I tell you, it's a major aspect as it is. If you look at the constitution from chapter 1 to the last chapter, even the language used is mainly he all the way. So we are looking at that. So we are looking at the gender character. Because if you're talking about federal character, and then you want every representation from all the ethnic groups, you should also look at the gender character. You should look at also the people living with disability. You also look at people, the downtrodden in society. They should be represented. We really think that if we must have a constitution that is for Nigerians as Nigerians, all these aspects must be included in the constitution. It must be represented in all aspects. Okay, in terms of appointments, in political appointments, political offices, and all that. If you're talking about the orphans, and there's nobody from that aspect of the society that can come and talk about what they're experiencing out there. If you're not an orphan, you don't know what the orphan is going through. If you're not disabled, you cannot know what the disabled is going through. If you're not a woman, then you really cannot talk for the woman. So as we speak, the constitution of the legislature right now, as we speak, is a no-no. Where you have less than 10% of women representing the interests of women, how can they get anything done as it is? Because if there's going to be a vote, how can 10% carry the vote of the day? Absolutely impossible. So these are the areas we're looking at. People out there, we as women, we know that except these things are done under the Constitution, there will always be a loophole for anybody to explore and tell you, oh, it's not the law, so what are you talking about? Granted that we're agitating for constitutional review, I also know as a matter of fact that the Constitution talks about non-discrimination, but in all aspects, all these years I've been in practice, I've not seen where a judge actually sat down to talk about this word discrimination in the real sense of the word discrimination, non-discrimination. Because if they are doing that, then there'll be no reason for anybody to tell me that somebody who is qualified to be a chief judge in a state, just for the fact that she's a woman, she has to be relegated. Or you're going for any particular office, somebody say, oh, woman, why a woman? So if we can get this written in black and white in the Constitution, then we know what we're going out, because no judge cannot tell you, oh, well, the law is not specific or the law is not. So we are looking at that aspect. So for us at Aula, we are saying gender parity is a must. If this country must move forward, it's like we're getting it all wrong. We got it all wrong from the very beginning. Because when you are actually, we're talking about a country where you have 50% of citizenry as women, and then there is no representation of that part of the society, then what we're talking about?
It's truly unacceptable.
The very critical part of that society is not represented. Then what are we talking about?
It's completely unacceptable.
Hello?
Yes, I was just trying to come in there. It's completely unacceptable. We live in a country with a constitution that allows a man to bestow Nigerian citizenship on his wife, but a Nigerian woman cannot bestow it on her husband. That just tells you, yes, the way that we're perceived.
These are the areas we're talking about. Because really, if you look at that section, it says, when a man can marry, and then when you marry, automatically your wife becomes a citizen. But for a Nigerian woman to marry, automatically your husband is not a citizen. So, that is discrimination.
But I wanted to ask you for your take on the comments or suggestions of Dame Colin Talon, the Minister for Women's Affairs, saying that the 35% affirmative action that has just served decoratively on several parties' manifestos, that has never been action, should be codified in the Constitution. What are your thoughts?
That is actually what we are agitating for. It is very, very important that it's stipulated in the Constitution. Because over the years, 35% affirmative action is just there. It's for decoration. Trust me. If it's not for decoration, I wonder why a president will appoint his cabinet and then you have less than 35% representation. Tell me. If it's in the Constitution, then we know we could go to court and then fight it out. But if it's not there, well, the judges, of course, because of course somebody's paying them, they'll be like, okay, But if it's specified black and white, there is just no way any judge can say because somebody is paying her salary for that reason. And then this also brings me to the issue of judicial autonomy. We can't get anything done for as long as the judiciary is still under anybody. Seriously. There is no way this country can move forward for as long as the judiciary is not independent. That is very, very key. If this country must have sanity, if there must be peace, if there must be justice, if it must be an egalitarian society, then the judiciary must be independent. That is very, very key. Anyhow you look at it, it boils down. It affects every one of us, both the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the common man, everybody. It affects everybody. In any society where the law is not firm, of course, anything can happen. That's why we have so much impunity in the society. So now, let me talk about the one that is really, really bothering me. We're talking about the aspect of even when these laws are made. And then, when we have ratified some international conventions and treaties, protocols and all that. And then, for one man's reason, for the reason, for somebody's self-aggrandizement and for selfish reasons, that law will not be domesticated in its own state. Why? So my take in this, if labor matters have been taken away from that realm where you put the fate of people under the domestication system, let's also take the case of family out of that realm. We need to put it under that system where international laws ratified by Nigeria applies automatically to our couples juries here in Nigeria. Because women are the receiving end of this whole thing.
Yeah.
If as a woman, I know I have these rights, and then in my state, like I remember there were some cases I had in Ogun State some time ago, and then whoever was there was telling me that's gender unit, was telling me, oh, this law is not domesticated yet in their state. They don't even have structures for it. And I'm like, oh, now we're talking.
Can't imagine.
So whether the law is there or not, for as long as it's not domesticated in that state, the woman is not protected.
All right.
So let me tell you now.
Thank
if you
so
look
much.
at...
I'd like to come in because of time.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, because of time. I mean, you've made a very great point, and today's Children's Day, just like the child right laws too, that have not been domesticated in some states, by extension too, these are things we should talk about, because when we talk about children, it affects their mothers, which are women. I just want to go one step further and say women in politics, in governance. There's a bill being pushed forward now in the National Assembly about creating extra parliamentary seats. Should we create extra parliamentary seats, or we just, put it in this same, review that out of the 3 senatorial zones, 1 should be for women in every state?
1 or 1.5. Sorry, I'm so crazy about 50-50%.
Or 2 if possible.
Exactly, or 2 if possible. Because if you look at it, once a woman is there, the interests of the youth and children are all protected. So if we look at it critically from that angle, you ask yourself, we really don't need extra seats, because the money the government is spending on this, seriously, is too much. So I, for one, will not support extra seats. Whatever seats you have, allocate what is due to women to them. So if we're having the number of seats we have right now, if we're saying 35%, I'm saying 50%, because that's what Go 5 talks about, 50-50. So if you're saying 50%, then whatever you had, divide into 2. Let women have 1, and let the other side have 1. And when we're talking about women, it talks about women, old, youth, young. So anyhow you look at it, same for the other side. It's also going to cover people living with disability, the downtrodden, everybody be represented. So we shouldn't create more seats. Rather, we should even collapse the seats. It's too many. We have too many seats, and we're not getting anything done.
Exactly.
So for me, I don't believe in that creation of extra seats. I don't believe in it. We have enough seats, and we have too many seats already, because we're not feeling the impact of this seats, so to say. We're not feeling the impact. As a woman, okay, look, let's talk about the case of victims of violence. A child has been defied. That child gets pregnant as a result of that defilement. Who takes care of that child that got pregnant? Who takes care of the baby, the product of that defilement? These are the issues we're looking at.
Anyway.
So we are talking about compensation for victims of violence. The Constitution talks about, apply for your fundamental human rights and all that, but we go for these rights all the time, but no compensation. So at the end of the day, we talk about prosecuting whoever is the perpetrator. At the end of the day, what happens to that child?
Okay, Mandy.
What happens to the product of that defilement?
Mandy.
So compensation is key. It should not just be for acquisition of property. No, it should also apply to victims of violence.
Mandy, we have...
That is very, very key.
Yes.
Yeah,
we have just about 2 minutes or less to go.
Yeah.
I asked you a question originally. What efforts are women groups making to make sure that their voices are heard? What's the level of solidarity among women? Because I asked this question. Lagos yesterday, the Southwest event on these public hearings, 2 women almost engaged in physical combat. And many Nigerians are concerned about that when there are issues about women empowerment, the women don't support each other.
Yeah, women supporting each other is, to a large extent, I would say that aspect is something that we need to go the extra mile to get done. I was a victim of that in the past election at Ikejaba. You find out that some women will just come together and tell, oh, is she the only one? Why must she be the one there? And all that. But you see, these are problems that can be resolved. We can take care of that within ourselves. Like the press conference we had yesterday, we had over 50 women groups coming together. So we are talking to ourselves. It's just a teething problem we are going to overcome very soon. We are getting there. As I speak, I know that by next time a woman is coming up and then elect people, the story will be different. Trust me, the patriarchy thing has really eaten deep into so many. It's a thing that seriously it needs a lot of re-engineering and to get them out of it.
On that note,
but as time goes on, I'm sure we're going to get there very soon.
Well, thank you very much, Mandy Asagba, for joining us and for your views on how we can go about the challenge of women empowerment and get results.